You're listening to the Staff Room Podcast with Tim and Pav. We talk casually yet poignantly about the most relevant topics in teaching today.
Come and hang out with us. We're always in the mood for a great conversation.
Welcome to episode 96 of the Staff Room Podcast. Today, we are putting technology under review. Is there value in the tech we are offering in the classroom, or is it hype? I'm very excited to dive into the conversation today, so let's get into it. My name is Pav Wonder, and I make up exactly half of the hosting team of the Staff Room Podcast. My co-host is on the west coast of Canada, and, well, he'll introduce himself.
I feel like we fell out of the lucky tree and hit every branch on the way down. Ended up in a pool of cash and Sour Patch Kids. Hi, Pav. Super happy to be here with you today. And yes, I am connecting like a live wire from the coast with the most, eh? I am a middle school teacher, vice principal, and the host of the Teachers on Fire podcast. Super honored to be sitting in Jim Guy's chair today.
Oh my gosh. First of all, Tim, I need to tell you that there's not a chance in the world that Che is going to get that reference. But I do, and I am so happy that that's what you used. And I feel like, oh my goodness, I finally got one. So I'm not going to give it away, but I thought that was great. And then for the first time, I'm going to watch Che reeling a little bit, trying to figure out what that one was. So I love that show, by the way.
It's amazing.
And you did a great job with that impression. So that's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And let me tell you, I am so honored and I'm so excited that you are joining. Che and I have been, I guess, tongue-in-cheek joking about you replacing him as my co-host pretty much since we began as a podcast. So I'm very glad that it's finally happened. Maybe not permanently, but at least for tonight. So thank you again for joining me for the Staff Room Podcast.
Well, as I said, Pav, what a huge honor. I'm deeply grateful and excited to be here. I love the topic. I love where we're going today. And this is just a ton of fun. So, Che, I don't think I'm going to put you out of a job, but I'm going to soak up this opportunity for what it's worth.
Amazing. Yeah. And this topic, very interesting. So we got together and without giving too much away with what's coming up next, we chatted about, some of the hot topics and some of the things that are kind of irking us, bothering us, something that's on our mind. We came up with a whole plethora of really great ideas and things that we can discuss. And tech seemed to continue to work its way into the conversation. And I know that there's been lots of conversation that we've been having over many years, but I think a little bit differently in the last few years, year and a half, I would say,
Right.
when it comes to technology and how it's being used in the classroom, in the school space, and just everything about it. So this seemed to be a natural fit, and we found some really great talking points. And so this is a part 1 of 2 conversation, but I'm not going to give any more details away than that. This is the conversation that's happening with you and I today about technology is going to be one of 2 very special conversations, and I'm excited to see how we talk today, how we chat today, and some of the things that come up, because I know we've got some great things on in our notes, and how part 2 unravels as well. So why don't we get into it? Because this is going to be a really great one. So technology under review, separating true value from hype, which is where we're going. And speaking of hype, Tim, what do you think about technology and ed tech in general? Is it overhyped?
Wow. Well, I mean, there's a lot to be said there, but I agree with your intro. I think ever since March 2020, when the world changed, there's been a big pivot in education into educational technology, both inside the classroom and outside of it. And we're going to get into all of that. So, I'm not going to give away my final answer, Pav, just
Mhm.
yet, but yeah, look forward to digging in and looking at some questions as we really, as you said, put it under review and really scrutinize what's the role of technology.
Amazing. So yeah, so I think what we wanted to get into first is that whole idea of it being overhyped. So what's the context there? There's so much hype around ed tech, especially right now, right? Like there's things coming at you from every place, and it almost feels like every tool that comes at you is like, this is the tool, this is the one that you need. This can do everything you need it to do, and then some. And then, and you seem to be bombarded with it, and everywhere you turn, and it's almost like, well, if I'm not using it, am I missing out on something big? So I think that's one of the first conversations that we want to have tonight is there too much hype around some of the tools that we have? What do we think about that?
This beat is technotronic. There's the dance floor. Get on it. This beat is ed techtronic. Absolutely. There's a ton of hype. Sorry about that, but
I love
there
it when you pump up the jam, my friend.
I'm pumping up the jam, and you're right. You're right. There, I mean, from books on ed tech to YouTube channels to podcasts. I mean, we have some great podcaster friends who have built their podcast brand around ed tech.
Mhm.
To conferences like ISTE, which I really enjoy. There's no shortage of buzz, and we've talked about how it's only accelerated lately. So let's start with the case for yes. I mean, again, the question is it overhyped? So here's something to think about that I've noticed, Pav, and that is, and you can tell me if this resonates with your experience at all, but I am on TikTok. I know you've recently waded into TikTok a little bit, and there
Mm,
is some really interesting little bits and bytes of professional learning on TikTok. But one statement that sort of follows, or one comment that I've seen around TikTok or Twitter, is this idea that TikTok in short video form is so good for Pro D, we should do all of our learning here. And
mm,
what teachers are sort of getting at is this idea that professional learning is ed tech, or how to, let's say, for example, use Padlet equals professional learning. And I would
mm,
say that, I mean, that's a part of professional learning, but it shouldn't be all of professional learning. This idea of picking up ed tech tools and learning how to use them in the classroom. So I think that's one way we overhype it, is we just say ed tech is it. And we're sort of pushing aside all of these other really important conversations around assessment and instruction and learning and equity and so on and so forth. So that's one argument for yes, it's overhyped.
yeah, I think that I have to agree with you there. It can become so overwhelming, and so in your face, and so just, exciting to be exploring these different types of ed tech. And when things like TikTok are in there, and you see that students are resonating with these short format videos, and they're actually learning from there, it gives you as an educator a little bit of excitement. And I feel like a lot of people just really dive in. They see, all of these teachers are doing TikToks now. Like,
Right.
maybe I should be doing TikToks as well. And it doesn't always work. I mean, something that I jotted down is that there's no one size fits all. So there are some students that really love TikTok, and they learn a lot through TikTok, and they bring that into the classroom. I'm using TikTok as an example, but this applies to all sorts of ed tech tools. But then there are some that are just like, this is not for me. So
Right.
I feel like part of that hype is really, if everyone's jumping off the cliff, am I gonna do that too? I feel like it's fun to dabble, it's fun to explore, It's fun to have that exposure, but I think you're absolutely right. I feel like it gets to be a little bit too much. Everybody just puts all of their eggs in that one basket, and then, they forget about, like you said, all of those really important aspects of professional development. There's so many different areas that I feel like, some of this learning about some of these ed tech tools should really be happening on your own, or maybe just quick little lunch and learns, or hey, this
Right.
is what I learned, share it at a staff meeting for a couple of minutes here and there. But yeah, I think I agree with you on that one.
On the other hand, Pav, in
Hmm.
terms of the case for no, that edtech is not overhyped, I think it's all about perspective. And I like what my friend Jake Miller at EduDuckTape says. On his website, he writes, edtech is a tool used to meet goals, address learning standards, and solve problems in the classroom, much as duct tape is used as a tool that solves a plethora of problems in our lives. And Jake is one of these people, one of these educators out there who really focuses on ed tech quite a bit, but he always adds this qualification that it's not about the tool, chasing the latest shiny thing. It's about looking at what it does to address learning standards. So I
Hmm.
think it is all about perspective. There are a lot of great tools. I don't think they're overhyped if we have that right perspective and if we keep the number one focus on the learning. Your thoughts on that?
Hmm. Yeah, it's hard to argue with that because it's so logical, right? I mean, if you really break it down and look at it in the sense that there are so many tools and you can use them in so many different ways that, as long as you are utilizing them appropriately within the classroom and for the way that you intend to use them in order to bring out the result that you are hoping for, then what's wrong with that? Use anything and everything that is available to you. And so I go back to the same reasoning that I provided for the case for yes. There's no one size fits all. Everybody
Mhm.
learns differently, and I think that we are blessed with this whole idea of the plethora. We have so much at our fingertips, and so much of it is so available for us to use right now readily. And so, if we can wrap our heads around the idea of dabbling with a few tools, providing them for students to use, because I think, as we all have found, students pick up things a lot faster than we do, and find ways to utilize them and embed them in their learning, and embed them in the way that they present their work to us as well, and to help them organize. This is something that I've been working on a little bit more myself. Is here are all the tools. You know how to use them, at the most basic level. Why don't you choose the one that works best for you to be able to demonstrate your learning, and you bring that to me? And I think that if we feel comfortable enough to be able to do that with our students, then the results can be pretty astounding. So
It's true.
um, I don't know if I helped to sway anyone to one side or the other, but as you said, I think it's really great to explore some of these different perspectives, just to get some different ideas on what we think about the hype.
Yeah, another way to think about it is I take a tool like Flipgrid. I see so much about Flipgrid on EduTwitter and elsewhere around social
Mhm.
media, but we don't start our lesson planning with Flipgrid. We start with a
Right.
learning intention and we think about, okay, Flipgrid is one option, one tool that may help my students represent their learning or reflect on their work, and that's the sequence. So yeah, uh, it's not overhyped. Can be in some quarters, but it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. All right. So that's a great start, Tim. I don't know. How are you feeling? Are you feeling Che like, or it's
Listen, Pav, some
yeah.
people want it to happen. Some wish it would happen. Others make it happen.
Oh, Tim, you are really good at this. I have to say, you just need to throw in a few more A's.
Uh, that's right. My A game is not at an A game yet.
It's not at an A game. Yeah, no, but it's fantastic. So, I guess let's move on to talk a little bit about
Let's do it.
the abundance of ed
Right.
tech tools. And I feel sometimes a little overwhelmed with how much there is. And there'll be times where I am working on something and all of a sudden somebody mentions a tool and I'm like, "Oh yeah, there's that too." There's
Right.
there's there's so much stuff that you could be using that you forget that it's there for you to use. And I feel like it's like I need a graphic organizer to organize all the tools that I could potentially be using with students. So, have we reached that point of saturation? Is there just too much ed tech out there right now?
Well, first of all, I love the comment that you made about the graphic organizer. And I've actually had the thought that it would be really good for schools and districts to create something like that. You sort of put at the center of the organizer the LMS, the learning management system, whether it's Google Classroom or Seesaw or Schoology or Canva or whatever, pardon me, Canvas or whatever it might be. And then you
Mhm.
branch out from there and you sort of map out visually like what are the go-to tools that we're going to try to work with, and what do we want all educators to be familiar with. So love the graphic organizer idea. Yeah, have we reached the point of too many? I mean, if you're ever at an ISTE conference and you go to that exhibitors hall, you will see just how many companies are out there right now trying to get their toe in the door of education. It's pretty incredible. So I think there are a couple ways to look at this. I think in terms of the case for fewer tools, we do have people who, like the response you just articulated, they hear about, oh yeah, there's one more tool I need to be using. And that can feel overwhelming. And I think attached to that, sometimes, not saying this is you, but for some teachers, there may be some fears or some narratives, some mindsets that appear really quickly whenever a new tool is mentioned or introduced. And so the questions that go on have to do with, do I really have time for this? Will this really support learning? Will it actually work? Will I break it? Will I be successful in learning how to use this effectively? All those tools and doubts creep in really quick. And so I think for those educators in particular who maybe don't enjoy the whole learning curve, there is a case to be made for keeping it simple, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I think you're right. I think my entire life I've never been an early adopter. I've never been. I've always
Yeah.
waited. No, and
Yeah.
it's I'm very conservative with my ed tech in my life,
Right.
and I think that a little bit of that comes from I just want someone else to do all of the preliminary testing and I'll pick it up when enough people have said, "Yeah, you know what? This works, and I like the way that it's being used." I remember when I was first exposed to Padlet and Jamboard, and these were tools that I was like, "Yeah, it's pretty cool, but I'm gonna let you use it first a little bit, and then I'll
Right.
see." First, how I can effectively work this into my programming. And then, two, how comfortable I can be where I'm not spending half of the lesson just fiddling
Right.
with fixing things that I messed up and I don't know how to fix it. So um I think that for myself and they're probably I'm not afraid of any ed tech. It's just this whole idea of I don't want to bring anything into my space until I know that I can use it efficiently.
Mhm.
And so in that sense I've remained very conservative. I think that at this point I've been exposed to enough ed tech that I know a lot about a lot of it, but I still, in my own practice, now when it comes to allowing students to use what they want to use, that's a little bit different. In my own practice and my own teaching, I tend to stick to the few that I am so comfortable with that I could use them with my eyes closed.
Hmm.
Um, and that changes over time. So it evolves to include more. And then I let go of some things to bring in others. So that definitely changes. But it's like that whole theory of everyone only has five friends, right? Those five friends might change over time, but you
Right.
can only really be very good with a certain number of ed tech tools, let's say. And I feel like I am one of those people. that I'm just, if you add that 7th or 8th one, I'm just like, no, everything just kind of becomes chaotic. So I think there might be a few teachers that are like me, and then there are some that are just like, bring it on, give me everything. So yeah, just a little bit of an anecdote, I suppose, with how I do. And I think that in this case, I prefer fewer tools to be utilizing, but I love the option of many. So I don't know if that answers anything.
Well, for sure. And I like that analogy that you gave, actually. I've never heard that before, but it makes a ton of sense about the five friends and thinking about five tools. I listened to, again, I mentioned Jake Miller and Tony Vincent the other day, and they were talking about, and these are very, very expert, they are masters of educational technology. And they talked about how really it is a short list. It's those
Mhm.
five go to tools, and you end up doing quite a bit with those. So it makes a
Right.
lot of sense. It keeps things, there's less clutter in a sense, there's less noise, and students are pretty familiar with whatever it is that they're working with.
Yeah. Where do you fall, Tim? Do you fall in the camp of fewer or bring it on?
Well, I'm a little bit more on the bring it on side, and I have heard the urge to minimize and keep that list really short. I love the examples that you brought up, Pav, about Google Jamboard and Padlet. And I did a virtual whiteboard workshop a few months ago where we just looked at all the different features of those two apps. And we also threw in whiteboard.fi, whiteboard chat. They all have different strengths and features that they offer learners. I don't think we are serving learners well by axing these in the name of simplicity. So, I guess where I would fall is, as a school, as a department, whatever it might be, you could talk about, maybe we're going to use Google Jamboard for the most part. But I just don't like, I get a little edgy when I hear about, we're not going to even give the option of this second or third tool because we are so committed to keeping things simple. I just
Right.
think that goes against my grain. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a fan of innovation, as I know that you are. And so I think, what are we afraid of? Kids can handle an additional tool. In fact, in some ways, we know from brain science that new things, unfamiliar things, these are the stimuli that actually bring about brain growth and development in some cases. So again, we're not just introducing a new ed tech tool just for the sake of it or just for the fun of it, but if there's an opportunity to bring a new angle or a new perspective, a new um, set of abilities for students to represent their learning, then I would say, why not?
I think that's such an important point that you made, that, we're building these neural connections in students, in their young and impressionable years. And I think we're doing them a little bit of injustice if we do keep it too simple, because their brains can handle this. And, it might feel like it's a little bit overwhelming for us as adults, but students are really good at putting these things together and finding what works best for them. So I definitely agree with that, and that's why I had also mentioned earlier that I like to limit it for myself, but I love to allow students to utilize whatever. And they teach me a lot of stuff. They bring in ed tech tools to me and say, can I use this? And I remember, I can't remember the name of it. It's a presentation tool where Prezi. I
Right.
remember when I was in my early years of teaching, and I'm like, okay, let's do PowerPoint, everybody. And they're like, Miss, can we use Prezi? And I was like, teach me about Prezi. I don't even know what this is. So it was such a great learning experience for me. So it's very much like, I get very excited when students are like, can I use the tool that I want to use? So that's very exciting. Just a little thing that I'm going to throw in there. Does it get too expensive on a cost
Mm.
analysis side? Now, if we want to bring in, all kinds like Padlet, Jamboard, and then whiteboard on top of that, are we now making things a little bit too pricey for us to be able to um, handle in school? Where are we putting that money when it comes to resources? So I don't know if you want to add to that or.
Well, for
with
sure.
it?
I think it's an important question. And I'm a little mad at my friends at Padlet, to be honest. Let's pick on them for a moment because if you look at their per teacher pricing, it's crazy. I can't
Mhm.
remember the exact dollar figure, but I'm thinking not many schools would be on board with actually buying a subscription for every teacher. Other tools like Google Jamboard, Whiteboard.fi are both they're the free. I know
Right.
Whiteboard.fi has a premium. So anyway, the point is definitely schools have to watch that because we all have limited resources. We can't pay subscription fees for everything out there. So in that sense, it does force us to be pretty selective.
Yeah, awesome. All right. So, great conversation so far, Tim. I'm really enjoying this. It's definitely a different vibe than myself and Che, but I think that at this point, I'm very comfortable chatting with you. You and I have talked a few times now in different formats and very, very different formats, actually. And so, I think that this is flowing really well, and I'm enjoying my time, and I hope that you are as well.
Ryan, be careful what you shoot at. Most things in here don't react too well to bullets.
This is so good. I love it. You
If
know
Jake
who's
can
gonna
figure
love this?
one out, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Kay is gonna love this. This is so good. Either
I
that
can't
or
wait
he's
to see.
shaking in his boots. Yeah.
I can't wait to see if he can pick out that one. But that's a
I
throwback
think
to one of my all-time favorite movies from the '90s. So we'll see how he does on that.
amazing. I mean, I have to say, Tim, you're very good at impressions.
Well, thanks, Pav. I'm trying over here. I've got a
Wonder
tough act to follow, eh?
No, no, no. You're doing fantastic. But let's move on to our last point that we wanted to talk about today, which is this ever popular topic of social media. And
Right.
I know that there are some very different camps with this one, right? It's like either a very hard yes or a very hard no. So
Right.
um, is edu social media really and truly helpful in our practice? Can we actually use social media as educators and have we seen success with it? What do you think about this one, Tim?
So many different thoughts, Pav, and I've listened to some podcasts recently where there's some educators are getting a little tired of the scene on
Mm.
Edu Twitter or other
Right.
platforms, sort of saying there's too much fluff, there's too much nonsense, there's too much what do you put in your coffee kind of conversation. So it's
Hmm.
complex. Do I still encourage teachers to hop onto Twitter? I do. I still think that there's a lot of value to be found by curating an education only Twitter following or Twitter, people that you follow on Twitter. But there is a lot of hype, there is a lot of noise, and not all of it is helpful. So I think where I would fall on this is you've got to be selective. It's not a blind jump into everything. And you also got to acknowledge humanity. You and I and Che have fun on TikTok. TikTok is not really a place where we do a ton of learning, but it can be a place where we bring educators a lot of joy and laughs and smiles and sort of encourage other colleagues, right? So I do think it's important to keep in mind the purpose. If I'm
Hmm.
encouraging a young teacher who is not connected outside of their building,
Hmm.
right now I'm probably still sending them to Twitter, but I'm also showing them how to get connected because Twitter is not necessarily intuitive. It's easy to tweet out a couple of quick comments and get crickets and then quit because, quote, it didn't work for me. So it's such a complex space.
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely as a teacher, social media is a very complex space and I can see and I have seen and I have to say that my journey with Twitter has been, up and down like a roller coaster. I joined many years ago and I came and I went. And then it was just one of those apps that was not really even on my phone for quite some time. And then I picked it up again and then you utilize it just slightly differently and you have to be invested in it. And that goes for every social media app. Instagram is another one. You actually need to spend time learning about the best way to use these social media apps. And
Right.
this is if you are using it as an educator to learn about best practices or to learn about new ideas or maybe some cool ways to set up your room or whatever, just little simple things like that. I'm even thinking about the overhypeness of using social media as a teacher with your students.
Mm.
And, do you have a class Instagram account where you sort of use it as a bulletin board for the class, as a part of the third teacher? Students are much more connected to that space than maybe even their own walls of their classrooms. So are they checking that space to see what the teacher is posting to share? Are they sharing with one another? Are we creating a safe space? I think that some teachers might feel like even that might be a little bit overhyped. I sort of feel the other way, but we can talk about that when we get to the case for no. But I think that there definitely is this idea that social media is a little bit overhyped, and we're bringing it into every conversation, and we're trying to use it way too much, and maybe we're encouraging students when we really shouldn't be, and be drawing them away from it because of the mental health implications that are involved with that, right? Like, I mean, recently Facebook put
Yeah.
out their results to the study that Instagram is really bad for kids. And so what are we going to do to combat that and talk to our students about it? And should we be steering them away from apps like this as educators? And where's our moral responsibility when it comes to that side of things?
I love the idea that you mentioned a minute back about staying connected on Instagram. I have a teacher account. I can't recall it just now if you do. I think
Hmm.
you do, but
I do.
yeah, I think it's wise. This is my own perspective on this. It's wise to have an education account separate
Yeah.
from your personal account, and to share education content, to share news from the classroom in the school. And I think that's a great opportunity for teachers who are working at a middle to high school level. What a great opportunity to connect with students, let them follow you. I know there are some sort of scary, sensitive areas around social media. We want to be careful how we connect and where we connect. Even I haven't gone too far into establishing conversations with students on social media. I think
Mhm.
that's a whole other conversation. But as you said, there are some really cool opportunities right now to connect kids essentially. And in during COVID, during hybrid, remote, all these different challenges that we're facing, what an opportunity! And it can
Mhm.
be done. It can be done well, and it can be done safely. One other
Yeah.
thing I'll slip in really quick too is I really like the practice of TED Talks, talk spelled
Oh, yes.
TOKS. You mentioned it earlier, but my friend Jeffrey Frieden in California and others are doing a great job of using content that, as you said, students, those are the spaces they live in, use that kind of content to represent learning. And so
Mhm.
I think if we completely skate by all of those opportunities, we're also missing out.
Yeah, indeed, absolutely. So, I almost feel like social media is a little bit underhyped when it comes to certain age groups, right? Like
Yeah.
with the high school and middle school years. I feel like this is a great opportunity to connect with maybe students that are a little bit, hesitant to get into the physical space, but they're more than willing to indulge in the online space. And I think it's a great opportunity as well to start having that digital citizenship conversation as well, and talk
Right.
about safe practices and when to turn away, and taking a look at things like airbrushing on Instagram. I know so many people my age who are like, I can't go on Instagram because it just puts me in a really bad
Mm.
space,
Mm.
seeing perfect people. And I'm like, well, these are 40-year-olds that are telling me this. Imagine what 13-year-olds are going through. And so I
Right.
think I think that there's a lot of conversation that can be had around it. And I've used Instagram with students, teaching students how to make an effective Instagram post is a great graphic tool that we work on in class to really, creating infographics. I mean, it's such an important tool to learn. And so, we use it quite a bit. Of course, as safely as we possibly can. My teacher account is private. Um, Conversations like you, a little bit iffy. I never add any, current students to my personal accounts.
Mhm.
So, there's a lot of things ethically to consider between teacher and student. So that's something to always keep in mind as well. But social media, definitely a conversation that has to keep going, and there's so much there as well. So, yeah, I think that. Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've heard you talk on your own podcast too about helping students create great social media posts
Hmm.
and the reaction of surprise that you got from some of your students. And I've sort of taken courage from that. So thank you, Pav, because I've been doing that in the last week or two as well, just using Canva, which I think many of us are using,
Mm.
the free education accounts, and
Yes.
helping students think through design principles. And I mean, this is all part of 2021, right? How do we communicate on these different platforms? And each one has its own language and customs, so to speak. And so, why aren't we being proactive in helping students represent themselves in a healthy way?
Absolutely. And that conversation that we had with students when they asked me, "Well, why would you be teaching us how to make an Instagram post?" And I said, "Well, I'm guessing that there's going to be a good chunk of you that grow up to be, or even in the next couple of years, become entrepreneurs. And this is a tool that you really need to learn how to do effectively. If that's something that you're thinking of selling your content, of just being able to put your content out there, so that people will be interested in it. You're all content creators. You may not see yourselves as that way, but this is the age that we live in. So we got to start thinking like that, and like you said, proactively thinking about that as we go. I think we've done quite a bit of talking, Tim. This is like one of Chain Pav's conversations, approaching 36, 37 minutes. So I don't know. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that maybe it might be time for a commercial break.
Let's do it, Pav. I think a commercial break sounds like the right plan. This episode is brought to you by Tim Hortons, the iconic coffee chain with OK Coffee, featuring locations from coast to coast. It's also brought to you by Teachers on Fire. And you can connect with me at Teachers on Fire at teachersonfire.net. And of course, connect on YouTube. I've got a growing channel over there, and I conduct live stream conversations with educators like Pav and Shay every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific and 11 a.m. Eastern. You're listening to the Staff Room Podcast with Tim and Pav. You know, Pav, taking on a challenge is a lot like riding a horse. If you're comfortable while you're doing it, you're probably doing it wrong.
I love that one. I can actually picture the episode that it came from.
Right?
Oh, key to my heart. This is great. I love it. Thanks, Tim, for joining me today. We've had such a great time talking about ed tech, and we'll do a quick little swag bag in just a minute. But while we were off on that commercial break, you and I were chatting a little bit about that social media aspect, and you gave this really great anecdote that I was hoping that you could share with us, because I think it's a really important one, and such a great idea. I think that it's something that I definitely will use with students this year or in the near future, if possible, because I think that this is a great idea for so many different reasons.
We know that our students are active all over the place online, but they don't actually have too much of a defined digital footprint that they can call their own, particularly at the middle school level, where you and I spend a lot of time. And I'm inspired by the work of Don Wettrick at the Started Up Foundation, who helps high schoolers actually develop and craft their own digital footprint. And they are already starting to build a resume, starting to put out content about what they're interested in, what their passions are, where their learning is happening. And these students are leaving high school already with a fairly well-crafted public image, a digital footprint, a result, a Google result, if you will. And so not only do I think that makes a ton of sense for juniors and seniors, but it also makes sense for educators, frankly. And here I have to tease you a little bit, Pav, because I know you're not a big LinkedIn fan, and frankly, most educators I don't think are, sort of regard it as a dead space. But there is more happening on LinkedIn, and I think it is because it is set as this space of it's a little bit more of a professional space. Not to
Mhm.
say you can't inject humor and fun, but it is a little bit more of a professional space. And I know you and Shay do have a staff room podcast account there. I think it makes a lot of sense for teachers to start to define like what is it that you're about? What are you same questions, right? What are you good at? What are you learning right now? What are some quotes from some reading that you've been doing or whatever, really? But start to define what it is that you're about so that when you go to that next interview, you do get some results that someone else hasn't written your story for you. You're actually defining who you are as an educator.
I think that it's so brilliant on so many different levels. And actually, as you were speaking about it and all the different ways that LinkedIn can be used right now, it reminded me of the empathy maps that we did in class. What are you good at? And what are you thinking about in terms of a career? What are your academic successes? Talk about the things that you want to get good at and some of your goals. And I feel like that's such a great space to create those empathy maps digitally and put that out there for people to be able to see in the future as well. It's funny that you tease me. LinkedIn is another one of those spaces that I entered when I became a professional, and then I
Right.
immediately walked away. And then well, it was just so much work. It's like I
Yeah.
spend all of this time on my paper resume, and now I have
Right.
to make one online as well. And I didn't really need it per se at that time. So we have a Chanpav LinkedIn as well. And actually, since entering the space as Che and Pav, we've found so much more value in it than we ever have as
Hmm.
individuals. And
Hmm.
I think it goes back to the purpose that you were using it for. And,
Right.
where is your content? Where do you want to grow? How do you want to grow? My
Exactly.
personal account, I had my teaching contract. I wasn't looking for anything else at the time.
Right.
I knew it as a place where people to come and headhunt,
Right.
essentially. So and that's really what it became. So we definitely are seeing the value and how much LinkedIn has also evolved over the last couple of years. And so yeah, like you said, there's so much more injected into it. That humor aspect, that little bit of humanity aspect of LinkedIn has really grown, and it's a great space for students to definitely get themselves into as they think about their futures as well. So thank you for bringing that anecdote in and talking a little bit about that, because I think it's a valuable tool, and I hope that other teachers are taking that away as something to try in the classroom. And speaking of takeaways, we have this little thing called the swag bag at the end of an episode. And I definitely am not one that does the swag bag. That's always Che. Although I always try to. And he says, no, 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 get your hands off of the touchpad of the Roadcaster. Uh, so, so I'm going to do the swag bag today. It's going to be a really brief one because I think that you and I touched on so many things, and that it's going to be really difficult to encapsulate that in just a couple of words. So, we started by talking about is edtech essentially overhyped? Are we just putting too much attention into it? Should we steer that attention away? And like we said at the beginning, there's no definitive answer here. There never really is on the Staff Room podcast.
That's true.
but we provided some really great perspectives for the yes and the no side of all of these topics that we discussed. The amount of ed tech tools that are out there, is the area completely saturated, or or is there room for a few more to be in there for us? So that was a really great conversation that we had as well. And then lastly, to end that off, we talked about social media and how we are using that in our spaces as educators to learn from, and then also as educators to teach with. And so I think that there's some really great conversation to be had even further with this. I'm thinking about all the different ways that social media can possibly be used in the classroom. I think I'm definitely for this one, but I think that there are definitely areas where we can get better as educators as well. So, lots to think about there. This conversation is certainly not over, and I say that figuratively and literally because this conversation isn't over. There is a part two to this, and so you're gonna have to tune in to see what happens there. Tim knows the secret, but not many others do. So. Tim, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure. It was long overdue that you came and hung out with us in our space, and I really value the many conversations that you and I have had in the past, and the many more that we are definitely going to have in the future. So thank you again for joining me as the co-host for the Staff Room Podcast.
Pav, it was an incredible pleasure. The appreciation is mutual. You are at the top, you and Che are at the top of my list when it comes to staying fired up for learning and education. And I have to say, you two are the pride of Canada in this education podcast space. Thank you for serving educators the way that you do and bringing that unique mix of fire and ice, humor and seriousness, and everything that you put out there. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much for those great words, Tim. And I look forward to a wrap up that we are going to be doing in the near future with these conversations. And once again, I thank you for joining us on the Staff Room Podcast, episode 96. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.